Okay, picture this. You're standing in a landscape so ancient, so extreme, and literally so unimaginably vast that the line between reality and magic just vanishes. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving into a really profound literary concept drawn straight from the deep sands of the Sahara. We're going to explore mythical realism in North African fiction, and we'll be focusing specifically on the work of the renowned Libyan author Ibrahim Al-Koni. His novels, books like Gold Dust and The Bleeding of the Stone, they don't just tell stories about the desert. They actually use the desert to fundamentally challenge how we understand fiction, reality, and ancient identity.
Here is our roadmap for today. First up, we'll look beyond magical realism. Second, we'll enter the living desert. Third, defining mythical realism. Fourth, animal spirits and rebirth. And finally, mothers, fathers, and myths.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Beyond Magical Realism, Understanding the Magic.
Now, I want you to think for a second about how you define magic in the stories you read. When the extraordinary happens in an otherwise totally realistic setting, what are the rules? Because, well, before we can understand exactly how Ibrahim Al-Koni breaks those rules, we really have to know what they are in the first place.
So let's establish a baseline. To do that, we can look at critic Wendy Ferris's widely accepted features of magical realism. Basically, in this genre, you've got elements of magic happening right alongside super detailed depictions of the everyday, phenomenal world. And it does this on purpose. It deliberately arouses a sense of confusion or mystery for the reader. It fuses completely different realms together, like the living and the dead. And ultimately, it disquiets our standard logical perception of time, space, and identity. In this global framework, the writer acts almost like a shaman, right? They're using verbal magic to essentially cure the reader of their stifling attachment to purely material reality.
But here is where things get really wild, because there is a massive paradigm shift we have to make when we apply these ideas to North Africa. Think about this contrast. The Western perception generally views myth as fiction, invented stories from the past. But for traditional societies, like the Tuareg of the Sahara, myth is perceived as a true, sacred belief. It's actual history. For them, a creation myth is absolutely true simply because the existence of the world is right there to prove it. It's not some fairy tale. It's a living record.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2. Enter the living desert, the Tuareg Sahara.
To really grasp the text of Ibrahim Al-Koni, you have to understand the deep, almost timeless history of his native region. We have to ground ourselves in the Tassili Niger region. It's this incredible, lunar-looking landscape in the Sahara. As early as 6000 BC, think about that, 6000 BC, prehistoric cave paintings were already recording climatic changes and animal migrations there. By the first centuries of our present era, those rock forests were actively documenting the evolution of human life. Fast forward to the modern era, and the Tuareg tribes still navigate this exact same space, blending a past of ancient mythology right into their present-day nomadism. Their culture is built on a continuum that spans millennia.
And Al-Koni perfectly captures how this extreme environment dictates the literature itself. Just take a moment to absorb this really beautiful quote from him. The secret of our being is comprehended in fusing the following trinity: the novel, the void, and myth. The novel is the spirit of the secret, the desert its body, and myth its language. The immensity of that desert void is so profound that standard, everyday, realistic language just completely fails. Myth is literally the only language vast enough to articulate the reality of the Sahara.
Let's move on to Section 3. Defining mythical realism, a distinct genre.
This perfectly illustrates the core difference we've been building up to. It's a real game changer. In traditional magical realism, the magic is very often a projection, an extension of the character's internal psyche out into the world. But in mythical realism, the magic is the physical outcome of the environment itself. The space is in action. The characters aren't projecting magic at all. Rather, they are led by the meditative, overwhelming nature of the desert into a spiritual state. The magic is literally in the sand, the wind, and the stones.
So let's lock at a clear definition here. Mythical realism is a genre where myth and reality combine to intertwine the human with the superhuman and the species with the trans-species. But listen, it's not just for aesthetics. It actually acts as a super powerful post-colonial reclamation of indigenous identity and ancestral memory. For a region whose history has been constantly perforated by colonization and erasure, creating myth from the creation myth itself is a vital way to remember who they are. It acts as a cure. It cures the reader of colonial amnesia.
Okay, Section 4. Animal Spirits and Rebirth, Rituals of the Desert. In Al-Koni's novel Gold Dust, the protagonist, Uhad, undergoes this profoundly intense ritual.
We can actually view this through the framework of religious historian Mirsha Eliot. It's basically a three-step process of initiation. First, the character approaches death by gradually losing their senses. Uhayat, for example, actually loses his ability to speak. Second comes immersion into the Earth's womb. This is what's called amniotic diving, literally plunging into a bottomless desert well. And finally, rebirth. Coming out of that water isn't just about getting clean. It is a complete cosmological reset. It's feeling as though you have quite literally been reborn from the Earth itself.
And this rebirth connects the characters straight to the desert's ancient spirits. It is absolutely fascinating how logically organized the poetry of Alconi's mythology is. The desert is defined by a deep, eternal duality. On one side, you've got the Waidan, a majestic mountain sheep. It represents the Rocky Mountains, it's aligned with the moon and the symbolic father, and it carries the mountain spirit. On the completely opposite side, you have the gazelle. The gazelle represents the sandy plains, it's aligned with the sun and the symbolic mother, and it carries the spirit of the sand. According to the myth, the gods froze an eternal war between the mountains and the plains by putting their spirits directly into these animals. Again, this isn't just a scenic backdrop. This is the physical reality that the characters are actively interacting with.
And finally, Section 5, Mothers, Fathers, and Myths, Ancient Sacred Figures.
There is a really poignant, kind of heartbreaking dichotomy in these texts. The father is very often characterized by absence, while the mother is characterized by presence. The symbolic father, who's associated with the moon and that majestic Wadan we just talked about, he's this unreachable truth. He essentially dictates an eternal, ongoing quest for the nomads. But the mother, associated with the sun, the land, and the earth, she is a legitimate physical reality. She is the presence that nurtures and grounds them in the severe harshness of the void.
And the ultimate mother presence in the North African desert is Tanit. She is the goddess of the desert, an ancient Libyan deity of love, fertility, and war. Some translations of her name mean she who weeps, while others call her the dragon or serpent lady. In Alconi's stories, characters invoke her name, they fear her anger, and they vow sacrifices to her. She represents this incredibly ancient matriarchal system. And the presence of Tanit in these modern novels is so powerful because it is the deliberate reclamation of a silenced, pre-Islamic Berber spirituality. She is the very spirit of the desert that ensures their survival.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that Ibrahim Alconi isn't just writing fantasy, and he's definitely not just leaning into exotic tropes. He is utilizing mythical realism to reconnect his people to a profound ancestral memory. In a region that has been so deeply scarred by colonization and the imposition of foreign ideologies, reawakening these animal spirits, diving into the amniotic wells of the earth, and calling upon the goddess Tanit, it's a massive, profound act of healing. It is a way to mend post-colonial wounds by stating unequivocally that their ancient reality, their magic, is still very much alive in the very landscape around them.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. We've seen how the Tuaregs' extreme environment literally shapes their magic and shapes their truth. So if the vastness of a desert can transform an ancient myth into a physical, everyday reality, what invisible myths and cultural memories are actively shaping the everyday reality that you live in right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the reality around you.